Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Kyiv says it won't confirm attendance at June the 2nd peace talks in Istanbul until Moscow submits its proposals. Pressure mounts from both Russia and the US, but Ukraine insists talks must start with clarity. Israel has accepted a US proposed 60-day ceasefire plan, which includes hostage prisoner exchanges and humanitarian aid into Gaza. However, Hamas states that the plan fails to meet key demands, including a full military withdrawal and a permanent end to the war, and is currently reviewing the terms. Paul Doyle appears in court, charged with causing grievous bodily harm after a car ploughed into Liverpool fans, injuring nearly 80 people. He faces 7 offences, including dangerous driving and GBH with intent. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says talks with China are a bit stalled despite a recent tariff truce, warning leaders may need to intervene. This comes as Trump's tariff plans face legal setbacks and an ongoing appeal. At least 117 people are dead, according to reports, and many are injured after severe flooding swept through Nigeria's Niger state, destroying many homes in the process. Officials say the toll has surged from earlier reports as rescue efforts continue. Israel accuses President Macron of launching a crusade against the Jewish state after he urges Europe to toughen its stance on Israel. Macron has said France will one day recognise a Palestinian state. British comedian Russell Brand denies 5 criminal charges of rape and sexual assault dating back over 20 years. He enters a not guilty plea at Southwark Crown Court in a high-profile case making headlines. The 22nd Shangri-La Dialogue commences in Singapore, gathering defence leaders from 47 nations to address escalating geopolitical strains. Key issues include China's assertiveness, the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict, and US tariff impacts on Asia. We start with the United States, where the US President Donald Trump accuses China of violating a recently signed trade deal. In a fiery post on his Truth Social platform, Trump claimed his fast deal saved China from economic collapse, including factory shutdowns and civil unrest. But he says China is back to business as usual as broke the agreement. Trump warned that despite his efforts to avoid further damage, he's done being, quote, Mr. Nice Guy. This comes after just weeks after both countries agreed to a temporary tariff ease. The agreement has reached levies on imports from both sides, but now Trump claims Beijing has failed to hold up its end of the bargain. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has also confirmed trade talks with China are a bit stalled and may require direct talks between Trump and Xi Jinping. Wall Street opened today lower after Trump's statements on China. Meanwhile, a U.S. federal appeals court has temporarily reinstated Trump's sweeping tariffs. This comes just a day after a lower court ruled he overstepped his authority. The Court of International Trade had declared the duties unconstitutional, saying only Congress can impose tariffs. Trump criticized the ruling as horrible and accused judges of weakening presidential power. He said on his Truth Social that the decision, if upheld, would, quote, destroy the presidency. In response, the White House is considering a Plan B under Section 122 of the Trade Act, which allows 15% tariffs for 150 days, a more defensible legal option. This uncertainty has also given the EU leverage in trade talks with the US, with EU officials maintaining they won't compromise on digital taxes or food standards. For now, the tariffs remain in place, but with court challenges underway. We're now joined by our guest today to discuss this in more detail. Peter Cordillo joins us to discuss this. Peter, this is after China and the US agreed. We thought that they had agreed to a deal, right? And we thought this whole tariff farce was over. Do you think President Donald Trump is restarting the trade war? And if so, why, after he saw so much fallout previously?
Well, to begin with, the trade war never ended. And obviously, it was a temporary deal that China signed with the United States after he lowered the tariffs from a real huge number and got it down to that 40% level. So it really wasn't the end of the trade war, or was it the end of the agreement? It was just a temporary agreement so that they could move forward. Obviously, according to President Trump, China violated the temporary agreement, and as a result of that, there'll probably be retaliation on the part of the United States, and so that just means that the negotiations are going to have to restart at probably at higher levels, and of course, Treasury Benson alluded to that, saying that maybe Mr. Trump and Mr. Xi would have to get involved and discuss and negotiate some sort of a deal. And I think that probably will happen, but it's going to take time.
Yes, and Peter, with all this legal back and forth going on in the American judiciary, does the US still have enough leverage to pressure China, do you think?
Well, I think it does, but I also think that China has enough leverage to make sure that they get what they want, and vice versa. And I think it's not only China. I think a lot of the other industrial nations as well. Let's not forget that reciprocal tariffs, will be set to restart in July, and so that means that negotiations will probably begin and could indicate that you're not going to see anything until perhaps the end of the summer. So it's going to take time, I think. And this one day on, one day off, unfortunately, I think is buying time. But eventually there will be deals.
Peter, this Section 122 has been floated for a safer legal option. Do you think that will give the markets more clarity, the American consumer more clarity? Do you expect more stabilization if that happens?
You'll probably see a little bit more stabilization, but I think the key is what's the inflationary impact from any tariffs agreements, and how much do the tariffs shave off of global GDP growth and China growth and the United States growth. So again, it's a big question mark. And let me just throw this out there. For instance, today we had good news on the inflation front, an index that the Fed looks at very carefully and takes it very seriously, the PCE price index. And we saw that inflation, top line inflation, on a month-to-month basis was up 0.1%. The core rate the same way. But the key to this report was the fact that on a year-to-year top line inflation moved to 2.1%. Well, that's just 0.1% away from the Fed target. Now, if this trade war would not be overlapsing the economic picture, most likely there could have been at least one rate cut beginning in June. And of course, we know that that's not going to happen in June. And so we need the Fed and the markets need clarification on the trade wars. That's just as simple as that. And what the impacts of inflation will be for the Feds. And that will determine whether or not the global economy stays afloat, whether or not China winds up in recession, whether or not the United States winds up in recession.
Peter, it's been a good while now since Donald Trump stood in that White House Rose Garden and held up that big board. How are Americans now feeling about these tariffs? Obviously, this 90-day pause in the tariffs is going to creep up on us. What are their thoughts? How do you think that this is all going to play out? Obviously, we can't speculate, and one cannot predict Donald Trump's actions. But how are the American people feeling about the economic policy of Donald Trump right now?
Well, let's put it this way. If you look at some of the macro indicators that suggest that, for instance, we saw spending, which was on the weak side. We got the final University of Michigan sentiment report out today, and it was up, but it was up not that much. Although we saw consumers' confidence rise from the ashes, you might say, but yet still in negative territory. So it simply indicates that the consumers are worried and they're not opening up their pocketbooks. And if you look at personal income, that was very strong. So income has not come down, right, which is a good thing. And that ordinarily means that you would have stronger consumer spending. But it's not happening because of the uncertainties. I would say that the American people are weighing all factors, and that they are hoping that there will be a quick resolution to this trade war, and that at the end it will be prosperous for everyone.
Peter Cordillo, thank you very much for your insight and joining us on the programme. We stay in the United States for our next story. The U.S. State Department has ordered all its consular posts worldwide to begin additional vetting of any non-immigrant visa applicants seeking to travel to Harvard for any purpose, according to some reports. Such applicants include, but are not limited to, prospective students, faculty, employees, contractors, guest speakers, and to tourists, the cable said. The order also directs consular officers to consider questioning the credibility of the applicant if the individual's social media accounts are private, and instruct them to ask the applicant to set their accounts to public. This comes after a U.S. federal judge extended a temporary restraining order blocking the Trump administration's policy that would have prevented Harvard University from enrolling international students. Moreover, U.S. President Donald Trump has called for a 15% cap on foreign students at Harvard University, escalating the situation. He's also repeated his demand that the university hand over a list of all its international students. Trump has also criticized the current figure of around 31% foreign enrollment, questioning where these students come from. He has warned that some could be troublemakers, quote, and suggested that American students are losing out on opportunities because of the high number of foreign admissions. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced plans to aggressively revoke visas of Chinese students. Rubio said the focus will be on those linked to the Chinese Communist Party or studying in sensitive fields like technology and defense. We're now joined by Ghanshyam Tiwari, who attended Harvard University. He's located in New Delhi with us now. Thank you very much Mr. Tawari, for joining us on the program. As someone who studied at Harvard, what is your reaction to this ongoing and developing situation?
Good evening, Thomas, to you and the viewers. There are three important things that are developing as we speak. One is that the message is to all international students that you are not welcome. And I think this message weakens the powerful place that United States has in thought leadership and leadership in research across the world. By targeting Harvard with this message, the administration is also sending a message to all universities. I graduated from Harvard in 2011 from the Harvard Kennedy School. I ran for the position of student president. The school had, just one school of the 14, had students from more than 100 countries. It takes enormous amount of foundational work of hundreds of years, enormous amount of thought leadership to bring together change makers, ideators who will shape the world from across the world and run classes that engage every student with diverse point of view. The current administrative efforts will weaken this leadership position that Harvard has.
Ghanshyam, the Trump administration has obviously cited this as both the spread of anti-Semitism on campus and also a security threat. Is this policy really about security, or is it the political targeting of such elite universities like Harvard University?
I listened to President Alan Garber speak about this, and some of the words he mentioned were interesting. For example, one of the phrases he mentions is a cultural battle against the university. The world belongs to a culture of knowledge in an era of artificial intelligence. And if the administration or people in administration look at it as a cultural battle, it will weaken the pursuit of knowledge. The motto of Harvard is truth, veritas, and pursuit of knowledge is built on the foundation of truth. As far as the charges by administration, the administration America is a democratic country. People voted for the president. So it is well within its right to investigate any citizen, any institution, or any immigrant in the country. But when the goalposts shift, when the courts come into the play, when the arguments shift, one starts questioning the motive, and that is what is confusing every student on the campus. Just when this argument was happening in the court, students were cherishing and celebrating their commencement. They were giving a standing ovation when President Garber spoke about the message he wants to give through the commencement to every student at Harvard and across the world. I think the administration can potentially look at the precise nature of charges it wants to bring towards the university.
Yes, and we've also had, we live in an obviously modern era where social media plays a big part. Do you think there's any dangers in that being vetted? Obviously, you've just mentioned over 100 countries that you know of attended Harvard University at the time you were there. Is there problems that communication, that messaging could get a little bit muddy in this?
Students go to a top university full of ideas and ambition, and their ideas and ambitions are shaped by their views as they exchange with other students, by the academic foundations that they receive from professors in the university, and the interactions that happen. When you build suspicion among those students that what you express can be looked with suspicion, you start creating a domino effect that can take away the thought power that the university will eventually have. And I believe that when you start looking at the social media of students, where would this stop? Tomorrow with AI, you would start looking at the emails that students would have, the WhatsApp messages that they have, the iMessages that they have. Eventually, you may have a software that you would ask students to submit their phone to be able to determine, according to the software, whether your entire temperament and expression is pro a country or against a country. I don't think there's a way to stop it. I think the universities, the fact that a university has become a top international university means that thought leaders and ambitious, talented people across the world trust that university, the university system, and the society that has built that university. The fact that students from across the world come to Harvard is a testimony of the trust that students from across the world also repose in United States of America as being the foremost democracy in the country, in the world.
Yes, Ghanshyam, let's go back. If you were sitting and making your decisions like you did, and this current administration, or these actions were going on, if you were applying today, picking your university today, would this policy, do you think, make you think twice about choosing America as a place to study?
Well, clearly the jury is still out there, but I believe that this repositions Europe and United Kingdom and probably Australia and even India as a major destination for people to come and study. And it also brings into question that how does democracy and pursuit of knowledge and academic freedom, how do they come together? I don't think that any country can hold freedom of speech, their constitutional obligations, without ensuring academic freedom in their campuses. And as this battle unfolds, I believe that the opportunity of thought leadership, attracting talent from across the world, attracting researchers from across the world, professors from across the world, may shift toward these other countries.
Ghanshyam Tiwari, thank you very much for joining us on the program. We now move on. China has issued a sharp warning to the United States over plans to increase arms sales to Taiwan. Beijing says it firmly opposes any such deals and is calling on Washington to stop immediately. The statement came from China's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Ling Juan, who reacted to a Reuters report that the Biden administration plans to surpass the Trump era's $18 billion in Taiwan arms sales. Lin called the Taiwan issue China's first red line in relations with the United States, urging America to respect the One China principle and the three joint communiques, especially the August the 17th agreement. Let's take a listen in to what he had to say.
中方坚决反对美国向中国台湾地区出售武器，敦促美方恪守一个中国原则和中美3个联合公报，特别是817公报的规定，停止售台武器，停止制造台海局势紧张因素。中方捍卫国家主权和领土完整的决心坚定不移。
With China increasing military pressure on the self-ruled island, Washington's strategy appears aimed at strengthening Taipei's defensives, but risks further straining ties with Beijing. China says its determination to defend sovereignty and territorial integrity is unwavering. We're now joined by Dr. Roger Liu, who's an assistant professor at the National Sun Yat-sen University, located in Taiwan. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Liu. How is Taiwan reacting to President Trump's plan to ramp up arms sales? Is it seen as a protection or a provocation?
We have been receiving the request and requirement from the U.S. for the past few years, especially to raise the procurement amount of the weapons from current 2.5% to at least 5%. So I think as a small country which has been standing long between the fault line of the new Cold War 2.0 between China and the United States, but I think Taiwan need to raise the bars of the weapon procurement in the amount. So this is actually a response to the recent exclusive story published by the Reuters from two American officials saying that Donald Trump administration is going to increase their arms sale to Taiwan surpassing even very easily from the first term, which is 18.3 billion. So I think this will be, we have been, the government of Taiwan has been preparing for the past few years to in military deployment, including the establishment of the whole society resilience commissions at the presidential office to increase the willingness for the Taiwanese societies to prepare for the the possible conflict between China and the U.S., which will spill over to Taiwan.
Yes, and Dr. Liu, do you think Trump's Taiwan strategy is strengthening peace or maybe raising the risk of war with Beijing?
Well, I think in the long term, China and the U.S. has been in a upward spiral in arms sales and security issues. So it's hard to defuse the bomb or the coming conflict or standoff, which is the best scenario between the two great powers. So to increase the arms sales actually has been a long-term policy from the U.S. side towards the Taiwanese side. Although China has been trying to focus on the so-called August 17 communique, which stipulates that the U.S. should reduce the arms sales gradually. However, a U.S. sector has new policies to overpass the August 17 communique, which is like the sixth assurance by Ronald Reagan in the 1980s. And actually, the U.S. has been trying to change its policy in the arms sales, especially trying to make Taiwan to comply on the 5% procurement level. So I think that will increase for the future, and this is something that we are going to see for the years to come.
Yes, and do you think that the US can continue to arm Taiwan while claiming it still respects the one China principle? And if you could, Dr. Liu, would you be able to explain just in brief, simple terms, what the one China principle is?
Okay. What you have mentioned, that actually is a very important differences. What U.S. has is the one China policy rather than China's one China principle. China's one principle is that the PRC actually is the only legitimate government representing China, and Taiwan is a part of that. However, the U.S.-China policy is relatively a vague and flexible policy framework that kind of stipulate the balance between the balance of power between Taiwan and China, and strengthening Taiwan's military capability to defend itself. Especially, the stress of the U.S.-China one China policy is that first, the Taiwan problem has to be solved peacefully. Secondly, the Taiwanese people's willingness and the intention has to be fully respected. So that's important, which is very far away from China's one China principle. So I think what the U.S. has been doing is by strengthening Taiwan, U.S. want Taiwan to have more leverage for the future if there is a possibility that Taiwan's issue will be solved either in, we hope, in a peaceful way. When we talk with Beijing, when we negotiate the terms with Beijing, we hope that we are backed by force.
Dr. Roger Liu, thank you very much for joining us on the programme. Well, that is all we have time for, and we will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world. Thank you for joining us.